Dean Obeidallah, host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, weekdays 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Sirius XM Progress Radio 127. He's a columnist for the Daily Beast. deanofradio.com is his website. You can tweet him at Dean Obeidallah, kind of intuitive. And, of course, on SXM Progress. Dean, welcome back to the program. Your op-ed last Friday, I think it was, on MSNBC, inspired my rant today. And by the way, I gave you credit. I don't know if you've read it yet.
I saw it. Yes, no, I read your newsletter. I subscribe. It's a great newsletter. I saw that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For giving me a shout out.
No, thank you very much, because I'd been rolling this idea around in my head for a long time that there are just huge parallels between the authoritarian Taliban movement and the authoritarian Republican movement and all the things that go along with authoritarianism. I think, you could draw parallels back to some of the right-wing parties in Europe in the 1930s as well. And but you just laid it out brilliantly. Share with our listeners your riff here.
Sure. I mean, essentially, there's two levels to it. The first was, hey, there's these Republicans like Kevin McCarthy and others saying we have to stand up for the women of Afghanistan, which I applaud that. But my thesis was, well, why not stand up for women's rights in America first? Because they'll give you more credibility. So I'm not at all saying don't stand up for the women in Afghanistan. Yes, they're facing a really dark future under Taliban rule. If the last time the Taliban ruled from the mid-1990s, 2001, is a preview of what we might see now. So that was first. But second, the other part was, and I'm very blunt because I didn't want to play games. I don't say the GOP and the Taliban are the same. But I do say this, and this is the truth, that there's a similar playbook from the extremists within the GOP, that they want to turn their religious beliefs into the law of the land, and specifically in terms of oppressing women. And they have Arkansas, I give an example, specifically Arkansas, they passed a law in March banning abortion except for the life of the woman who's pregnant, meaning if you were raped in Arkansas, you can't get an abortion. And if anyone helps you try to get an abortion, it's a felony. That's literally the law. That's not a proposal. That's the law. It's held up by the federal courts right now. But I started my article with that, sort of the idea of if you read about a place where women can't get abortion even when they're raped, and it's a crime to help them get an abortion, would that be a Taliban law? I said, no, it's an Arkansas GOP law. And that's really what they want the law of the land to be. And I cite Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, when signing it, specifically citing his pro-life beliefs, which I respect people's religious beliefs. I just don't want them the law of the land. I'm a person of faith, too. I'm not going to make my Muslim beliefs the law of America. That's outrageous. I'll fight anyone, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, any faith, who wants to turn their law into their rules into our law. That's Islamic Sharia. These guys want to do Christian Sharia, and it's time we call it out even more. And Tom, it really pissed them off in ways. There were op-eds written against me in Fox News, Town Hall, the Washington Examiner today. Their editorial board, not the op-ed, their editorial board attacked me for writing this, the Catholic League and others. But what I find curious, Tom, not one of them in any article says they don't want to turn their religious beliefs into the law of the land. They're upset with me hinting the Taliban and the GOP is the same. They want to turn their religion, their perverted view of the Bible into our law. They're not denying that. That's where they are. That's what they're about.
This is not a new debate in the United States, Dean. Back at the founding of the Republic, there's a whole series of letters back and forth between when Thomas Jefferson was in Paris as the U.S. envoy to Paris, and his protege, James Madison, who almost a decade later would be known as the father of the Constitution. They were corresponding about what ultimately became the First Amendment and the no religious test clause in the Constitution. And Jefferson's fear was that priests could become politicians, and that and he was in favor of religious figures being barred as long as they held a religious office, being barred from public office. And right. Madison, who was, and of course Jefferson was basically an atheist, he was a deist. Madison, on the other hand, was either a Presbyterian or a Congregationalist. He was, kind of one of these kind of plain vanilla Christian guys, but he was very into his Christian faith. And Madison was not concerned about that. He figured that we would be able to control priests in political office. He was concerned about the corruption of the church by government. In other words, Jefferson was afraid that government would be corrupted by the church. Madison was afraid that the church would be corrupted by government, so much so that when he became president in 1811 or 1809, the first veto that James Madison issued, the George Washington administration had started a poorhouse in Washington, D.C. for the poor. It was paid for with federal funds. And it housed them, it clothed them, it fed them, and it gave them medical care. And during the Madison administration, so welfare in the United States, socialism goes back to George Washington. But in the Madison administration, here we now, he's the fourth president, the Congress had passed a law that took control of that poorhouse out of the hands of the federal government and put it in the hands of a local church, and with the federal government paying the church to do it. In other words, kind of subcontracting it. That was Madison's first veto. And he vetoed it, saying that it would establish a precedent of the federal government giving money to religious organizations which could destroy religion, which would corrupt religion. And I think you could argue we have both. You've got all these religious organizations that are taking piles of money from political sources and whatnot. And at the same time, you've got all these religious folks inside government. Which do you think, so I think both of their nightmares came true. And both of them were trying to reassure the other, oh, your idea is never going to happen. They were both right, they were both wrong. But how is it worse, Dean? I know that you're far more finely, acutely aware of this than I am. Given the fact that you're Muslim and, after 9/11, this just, you and so many other people, of your faith had a bullseye on your back, essentially, at least a political one. Your thoughts on that debate and how it's playing out today?
Well, I always think of Thomas Jefferson's famous letter to the ministers talking about the absolute wall between church and state that he envisioned. And to me, that really was giving you a sense of what he believed the First Amendment was going to be and what it should be. You have the GOP increasingly looking like the autocratic party. We know that, but the religious-infused autocratic party. And, I was doing research earlier. It's not in this article. I'll probably write an article later. But you have more rights as a woman in many, many Muslim countries over the control of your own body than you would in Arkansas if this law remained in effect. And when you see Asa Hutchinson, when you see the GOP state senator in Arkansas, when they signed this, he talked about our goal is to abolish abortion throughout the nation. They even want to get rid of it, Tom. In the case of the woman carrying the fetus, if her life is at risk, they don't want to let her get an abortion. And their idea is that it's God's will. Right. Look, I'm all down with God's will, but you don't make that law of the land. That's ridiculous. In Muslim country after Muslim country, the life of the mother, they can always get an abortion. And in countries like Tunisia, you can get it for almost any reason you want. It's not really a very conservative country, but still you have the spectrum within that world where people think, oh, wow, Muslims horribly oppressed. Yes, in certain countries they are. In others, they've evolved. And, you can't get away from the fact that GOP and the Taliban are similar in this. They truly want to make their religious text and their interpretation of that, because I can assure you, as a Muslim, there's almost no one in the Muslim world that now adheres to the Taliban's view, but they want to make it the law of the land. And look at Tom for an example. People, I hate when the media goes, Taliban wants to impose Sharia. They don't even know what Sharia means when they say it. Right. It's not a book of law. Look at Pakistan, neighbors Afghanistan. Pakistan elected a woman as prime minister, Benazir Bhutto, twice. We haven't elected a woman. 60% of the doctors in Pakistan are women. CEOs of companies are women. So who defined Islam correctly? Is it Pakistan or is it Taliban, which is way out there as an outlier? I think, though, in America, the GOP represents their view of Christianity. It's an extremist view. I don't think it's mainstream, but I still think it's oppressive. And I had so many emails from these people going, well, they cite the Bible to me, going, well, that should be the law. I go, in the Bible, it says in the Old Testament, if a woman's not a virgin on her wedding night, she should be stoned to death. Is that next? It says in the New Testament, a woman should learn in silence. Will we be next making that law? And they disappear when you ask that. because I've had this debate over years when they've said Muslims want to impose the Quran in America. We don't. There's no evidence of this. But look at the Bible. You want to find some scary things and some great things? Yeah. If you're a right-wing Christian, why not start with imposing in Matthew, which says, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger. You welcomed me in. Let's start there with that Christianity. And then we can talk about other things and debate that later.
Right. How do you, Dean, we just have a minute and a half, by the way, till we're going to hit a hard break here. How do we start deconstructing this binding of fundamental radical Christianity to the Republican Party?
I don't think it's possible. I think they've made that. We may even talk about it on the show. At one point, the pro-life movement wasn't a part and parcel of the GOP and turning that religious belief into the law of the land. But the GOP continues down that path. And like with most things, the GOP becomes more extreme. At one point, Tom, we all know this, they were okay with 3 exceptions for abortion: rape, incest, the life of the mother. Now they're down to 1, the life of the woman who's pregnant, and now they're moving to even ban that because of God's will. I'm not kidding. So the GOP is becoming more and more extreme. It won't end with abortion. It can't. And it's going to be a dark day for the women of America where they have less rights simply because of their gender. Like in Afghanistan, it's a crime to be born a woman. I hate to think in America that's where we're heading. If Roe versus Wade happens, you're a woman in a red state, it will be a crime to be a woman because you will literally have less rights in your red state than you will in a blue state. That's why abortion can't be states' rights.
Yeah, not so much literally a crime as you're simply less than fully human.
That's what I mean by that.
Under the eyes of the law.
You're already suffering. And as I note in my article, these Republicans about women's rights. Tom, we had Kevin McCarthy and others voted against the Violence Against Women Act, voted against equal pay 2 months ago. All of them. Start there, Republicans. Show us you care about women, gender equality, and protecting women and their control of their body by fighting for America's women. How about that first?
Yeah.